Think slower, decide better. Why your best ideas need more time than you're giving them. Written and narrated by MSE Boost. Fast thinkers aren't better thinkers. They're just faster at being wrong. This simple truth contradicts almost everything you've been taught about success, intelligence, and getting ahead. From the classroom to the boardroom, speed has been packaged and sold as the ultimate marker of competence. The quick answer wins the respect. The instant decision earns the promotion. The rapid response gets the deal. You absorb this message thousands of times without questioning it, and it has quietly sabotaged your judgment for years. The damage runs deeper than a few bad choices. Speed worship has rewired how you approach problems, evaluate information, and trust your own conclusions. It has trained you to feel uncomfortable with silence, anxious during pauses, and suspicious of anyone who needs time to think. The cultural programming is so thorough that slowing down feels like failure, even when rushing has cost you money, opportunities, and peace of mind. This chapter will dismantle that programming and replace it with something far more useful. The understanding that deliberate thinking is your single greatest untapped resource. Chapter 1. The Speed Lie. The mythology of fast thinking has a long history, but its current intensity is relatively new. Previous generations valued careful consideration. Elders were respected precisely because they didn't rush. Wisdom meant weighing options, sleeping on decisions, and seeking counsel before committing. The village leader who announced major choices without reflection would have been viewed with suspicion, not admiration. Something shifted. The Industrial Revolution introduced time as a commodity, and efficiency became sacred. Then came the Information Age, which accelerated everything further. Response times shrunk from days to hours to minutes to seconds. Each technological advance tightened the expectations around speed until instant became the baseline, and anything slower felt deficient. The business world eagerly adopted this ideology. Management theories celebrated quick decision-makers. Case studies praised executives who moved fast and broke things. Job interviews started including questions designed to test how rapidly candidates could think on their feet. The underlying assumption went unexamined. Faster equals smarter equals better. But faster doesn't equal smarter, and smarter doesn't automatically equal better outcomes. Research consistently shows that speed and accuracy are separate variables. Being quick tells you nothing about being right. Some fast thinkers happen to be accurate. Many are not. Some slow thinkers are uncertain and confused. Many are simply thorough. The correlation between decision speed and decision quality is far weaker than popular culture suggests. What does correlate with quality? Time spent questioning assumptions. Time spent gathering relevant information. Time spent considering alternatives. Time spent checking your emotional state. Time spent sleeping on significant choices. These factors predict good outcomes far more reliably than how quickly you committed to a course of action. The speed lie persists because fast decisions create the illusion of confidence. When someone announces a choice without hesitation, observers assume that person must know something. The quick decision feels authoritative. The pause feels uncertain. But feelings and facts are different things. Confidence and competence are different things. The person who decides instantly may simply be too uninformed to recognize the complexity of the situation. Your brain has two systems for processing information. The first operates automatically, quickly, and without conscious effort. It handles routine tasks, pattern recognition, and snap judgments. This system kept your ancestors alive by enabling rapid responses to threats. It still serves useful functions today. You don't need to deliberate about whether to step out of the way of an oncoming car. The second system is slower, more effortful, and requires conscious engagement. It handles complex reasoning, careful analysis, and novel problems. This system produces your best thinking, your most creative solutions, and your soundest judgments. It also requires something that modern life rarely provides: time. The trouble is that the fast system constantly volunteers for tasks it isn't equipped to handle. It offers quick answers to complicated questions because that's what it does. It produces responses rapidly and confidently regardless of whether those responses are appropriate. The slow system, meanwhile, is lazy. It requires effort to activate and sustain. Given any opportunity to defer to the fast system, it will. This means your default mode is rushed thinking. Unless you deliberately intervene, your brain will spit out the first plausible answer and move on. The answer might be excellent. More often, it's adequate at best and disastrous at worst. You'll never know the difference unless you pause long enough to engage the slower, more reliable system. Every time you feel pressure to decide quickly, you're feeling the fast system, trying to close the loop before the slow system gets involved. That pressure isn't evidence that speed is necessary. It's evidence that your brain is taking shortcuts. Sometimes shortcuts are fine. Sometimes they lead you off a cliff. The costs of speed-driven decisions accumulate invisibly. Bad choices made quickly don't announce themselves as products of rushed thinking. They blend into the background of normal life, chalked up to bad luck or circumstances beyond your control. This makes the pattern hard to see. Consider the purchases you've regretted, the commitments you shouldn't have made, the words you wish you could take back, the opportunities you missed because you locked yourself into something else too soon. How many of those resulted from snap decisions that felt right in the moment but fell apart under the weight of reality? Most people dramatically underestimate this number. Hindsight bias convinces you that mistakes were unavoidable, that you couldn't have known better at the time, but often you could have if you'd slowed down. The information was available. The warning signs were present. Your instincts might have even whispered caution. Speed drowned them out. Financial decisions suffer particularly. Studies of investor behavior reveal that frequent traders consistently underperform patient ones. The urge to act quickly, to buy the rising stock before it climbs higher, to sell the falling stock before it drops further, leads to systematic errors. Each rapid decision carries transaction costs, emotional volatility, and increased exposure to the noise of short-term fluctuations. The investors who do best are often those who make the fewest moves. Career decisions follow similar patterns. The quick job acceptance prevents you from receiving the better offer that would have arrived next week. The hasty resignation burns bridges that might have supported you later. The rapid commitment to a project you didn't fully understand traps you for months or years. Speed creates chains disguised as momentum. Even small daily decisions compound. The quick yes to a meeting eats an hour you needed for deep work. The rapid agreement to help someone depletes energy you'd allocated elsewhere. The instant purchase adds clutter and subtracts money without adding proportional value to your life. Each individual choice seems trivial. Multiplied across weeks and months and years, they shape the entire trajectory of your existence. Speed addiction develops gradually. Rushing becomes habitual, then compulsive, then invisible. You stop noticing that you're doing it because you've been doing it so long that anything else feels abnormal. The addiction has physical components. Rapid decision-making triggers small dopamine releases. Checking off items quickly feels satisfying in ways that methodical work does not. Your brain learns to crave the hit of finishing fast and starts manufacturing urgency to create opportunities for that reward. Suddenly, everything feels time-sensitive, not because it is, but because your neurochemistry wants it to be. The addiction has social components too. People around you reinforce speed because they're similarly conditioned. Colleagues admire quick responses. Bosses reward rapid execution. Friends respect decisive confidence. Slowing down invites friction, confused looks, subtle pressure, even explicit criticism. The social cost of deliberation often exceeds the social cost of rushing, which encourages more rushing regardless of which approach produces better outcomes. Breaking this addiction requires recognizing it as an addiction rather than a virtue. Speed isn't strength. It's a compulsion dressed up as competence. The person who needs to decide immediately is no different from the person who needs another drink or another notification check. The need itself is the problem. There's an economic principle that helps clarify what's actually happening when you rush. Opportunity cost. Every choice you make eliminates alternatives. When you decide quickly, you eliminate those alternatives before you've had a chance to properly evaluate them. You don't know what you're giving up because you didn't take time to find out. Slow thinking isn't just about making the choice in front of you more carefully. It's about expanding your awareness of what else might be possible. Time allows for research. Time allows for consultation. Time allows for creative alternatives that only emerge after the obvious options have been considered and found wanting. The best negotiators understand this intuitively. They never accept the first offer, not because the first offer is always bad, but because they haven't yet discovered what else might be available. They slow the process down to learn more about the other party's constraints, about market conditions, about their own priorities. This information changes everything. You can apply the same approach to personal decisions. The job offer that feels like a now or never opportunity probably isn't. The purchase that claims to be a limited time deal will likely appear again. The relationship decision that seems urgent today will still be there tomorrow. Artificial deadlines serve the interests of whoever creates them. Your interests are served by seeing through the manufactured urgency. Slowing down doesn't mean becoming passive or indecisive. This distinction matters because speed culture has conflated deliberation with weakness. Taking time to think is not the same as being unable to choose. Pausing for reflection is not the same as being paralyzed by fear. The goal isn't endless analysis. The goal is appropriate analysis, enough to make a sound decision, no more and no less. The difference between deliberation and procrastination lies in productive activity. When you deliberate, you gather information, question assumptions, consider alternatives, and test your reasoning. When you procrastinate, you avoid the decision entirely, usually by distracting yourself with something less demanding. Deliberation moves toward resolution. Procrastination circles without progress. Skilled thinkers learn to recognize which mode they're operating in. Are you spending time on the decision, or are you spending time avoiding it? Are you learning something useful, or are you simply postponing the discomfort of commitment? These questions keep deliberation honest and prevent it from becoming an excuse for inaction. The appropriate amount of time varies with the stakes. Minor choices deserve minimal attention. Major choices deserve substantially more. The problem isn't that people take too long on small things. That's relatively rare. The problem is that people take too little time on big things, applying the same rapid-fire approach to career changes and investment decisions that they apply to lunch orders. Your instinct to move fast comes from good places. Evolutionarily, speed mattered for survival. Socially, responsiveness signals engagement and respect. Professionally, execution distinguishes achievers from dreamers. These aren't bad instincts. They've served you well in many contexts. The error is applying them universally. Speed belongs in some situations and not others. The survival instinct that helps you dodge traffic should not determine how you approach a financial commitment. The social responsiveness that maintains friendships should not dictate how you evaluate a job offer. The professional execution that earns respect should not rush you into partnerships you'll regret. Learning to think slower means learning to recognize when your fast instincts are helping and when they're hurting. It means developing the awareness to notice artificial urgency, the discipline to resist it, and the skill to use time productively once you've created it. These capabilities don't come automatically. They require practice and attention. The rest of this book provides that practice. You'll learn to identify the specific types of decisions that deserve more time. You'll acquire a concrete method for what to do during the pause, how to structure your thinking so that extra time translates into better outcomes rather than more confusion. You'll develop strategies for protecting your thinking space against the relentless pressure of a culture that worships speed. None of this requires becoming a different person. You don't need to adopt a contemplative lifestyle or radically restructure your days. The changes are tactical, not philosophical. They fit into your existing routines without demanding dramatic sacrifice. The goal is precision, slowing down at the moments when it matters most while maintaining the pace that works everywhere else. The speed lie has cost you more than you realize. Bad decisions you attributed to circumstances were often decisions you could have improved by taking more time. Opportunities you missed were often opportunities you could have noticed with a few additional minutes of reflection. Regrets you carry were often preventable if you'd questioned the pressure pushing you towards speed. This isn't meant to create guilt about the past. What's done is done, and beating yourself up over previous choices serves no useful purpose. The point is simply to establish the stakes for what follows. Slowing down isn't a minor optimization, it's a fundamental shift that affects virtually every domain of your life. The executive who pauses before responding to a crisis often outperforms the executive who reacts instantly. The investor who waits before trading often outperforms the investor who moves on impulse. The individual who sleeps on major purchases often reports higher satisfaction than the individual who buys on sight. These aren't coincidences. They're predictable outcomes of giving decisions the time they deserve. You already possess the capacity for better thinking. Your slow system is perfectly functional. It's just underutilized. The machinery works. You simply need to turn it on more often and keep it running longer before switching back to autopilot. Speed culture won't change because you read this book. The pressure will continue. Colleagues will still expect rapid responses. Social media will still reward instant reactions. Marketers will still manufacture urgency. The entire environment will continue pushing you toward decisions you haven't adequately considered. Your defense is internal. You can't control external pressures, but you can control how you respond to them. You can notice when speed is being demanded for someone else's benefit rather than yours. You can recognize when your own fast system is volunteering for tasks it shouldn't handle. You can create pockets of protected time where careful thinking can occur. This isn't about perfection. You won't slow down for every decision, and you shouldn't try. The goal is shifting your default on the decisions that matter most. Buying yourself enough time to engage your full cognitive capacity before committing to paths that will shape your future. The chapters ahead provide the tools. First, you'll learn to distinguish the decisions that deserve extra time from those that don't. Then, you'll acquire a practical method for using pauses productively. Finally, you'll develop strategies for maintaining deliberate thinking even when surrounded by urgency. Each piece builds on the previous, giving you a complete system for thinking slower and deciding better. The speed lie has run your life long enough. It's time to take that power back. Chapter 2. The moments that matter. You don't have time to think slowly about everything, and you shouldn't try. This might seem like a strange admission after spending an entire chapter arguing for deliberation, but the goal was never to turn you into someone who agonizes over every minor choice that would be exhausting, impractical, and counterproductive. The real skill isn't slowing down universally. It's slowing down selectively. Knowing when to pause changes everything. Pausing randomly wastes your mental resources on trivial matters, while leaving you depleted when significant decisions arrive. The distinction between decisions that deserve time and decisions that don't isn't always obvious. Your brain treats most choices with the same urgency regardless of their actual importance. The lunch order feels pressing. The career change feels pressing. The impulse purchase feels pressing. The investment decision feels pressing. Everything competes for attention with equal intensity, which means nothing gets appropriately prioritized unless you impose a framework from the outside. This chapter provides that framework, a clear set of criteria you can apply quickly to determine whether a given decision merits careful deliberation or can safely be handled on autopilot. Speed serves you well for most daily choices. What to wear, what to eat, which route to take, how to phrase a casual message. These decisions benefit from quick resolution. Spending significant mental energy on them produces diminishing returns. The perfect lunch choice isn't meaningfully better than a good enough lunch choice, and the time spent optimizing could have been applied elsewhere. The trouble starts when you apply the same quick resolution approach to decisions that aren't routine. Your brain doesn't automatically distinguish between low-stakes and high-stakes situations. It processes both using whatever mode you've activated, which for most people is the fast mode almost all the time. This means consequential choices often receive the same superficial treatment as inconsequential ones. Slowing down for everything would solve this problem, but create others. Decision fatigue is real. Your capacity for careful deliberation is finite. Burn through it on minor matters, and you'll have nothing left when something significant arises. The strategic approach preserves your deliberative capacity for situations where it actually matters. 4 categories of decisions consistently benefit from slower thinking. These aren't arbitrary groupings. They share specific characteristics that make speed particularly dangerous. Learning to recognize these categories gives you a reliable filter for determining when to pause. The first category includes decisions with significant financial consequences. Money choices amplify errors because they compound over time and constrain future options. A poor investment doesn't just cost you the initial amount. It costs you everything that money could have earned over years or decades. A bad purchase doesn't just waste dollars today. It often requires additional spending to correct or replace. Financial decisions also tend to be irreversible or expensive to reverse, which removes the safety net that makes quick choices acceptable in other domains. The threshold for significant varies by person. What counts as major for someone early in their career differs from what counts as major for someone with substantial savings. The relevant question isn't whether the amount seems large in absolute terms, but whether losing it would meaningfully impact your life. $100 might be trivial for some people and substantial for others. You know your own situation well enough to calibrate accordingly. Speed kills financial decisions because it prevents proper evaluation of alternatives and risks. The quick investment happens before you've researched the company or understood the market conditions. The rapid purchase happens before you've compared prices or questioned whether you need the item at all. The hasty loan agreement happens before you've calculated the true cost of the interest. Each of these mistakes is preventable with modest additional time. Each becomes locked in the moment you commit. Career decisions form the second category. These choices shape the trajectory of your professional life in ways that extend far beyond the immediate situation. Taking a job determines who you'll work with, what skills you'll develop, what opportunities you'll access, and what options you'll have when you're ready to move again. Leaving a job closes certain doors while opening others. Accepting a promotion or turning it down ripples through your future in unpredictable ways. Career decisions also operate on longer timescales than most other choices. You might stay in a job for years. You might work in an industry for decades. The relationships you build, the reputation you establish, and the expertise you accumulate during these periods become the raw material for everything that follows. Quick decisions truncate this view, optimizing for immediate appeal without considering long-term fit. The pressure to decide quickly on career matters often comes from external sources. Employers want answers fast because they have other candidates to consider. Opportunities appear time-sensitive because they genuinely are. The position won't stay open forever. This creates real tension between taking enough time to think and avoiding the loss of the opportunity entirely. The solution isn't ignoring these deadlines, but rather using the available time more effectively. Even a "we need your answer by tomorrow" situation provides hours for deliberation. Most people spend those hours anxiously waiting for clarity to appear spontaneously rather than actively working through their analysis. The pause doesn't need to be long. It needs to be productive. A few hours of structured thinking outperforms days of passive rumination. High-emotion situations constitute the third category. Strong feelings, anger, fear, excitement, anxiety, alter your cognitive function in measurable ways. Blood flow shifts away from the prefrontal cortex, which handles complex reasoning, toward older brain structures designed for rapid survival responses. This made sense when threats were physical and immediate. It makes less sense when the threat is an insulting email or a frustrating negotiation. Emotional arousal narrows attention. You focus intensely on the trigger while ignoring contextual information that might change your assessment. You overweight immediate concerns and underweight future consequences. Your capacity for creative problem-solving diminishes, because creativity requires the kind of open, exploratory thinking that intense emotion suppresses. The decisions you make while emotional tend to reflect your feeling state rather than your actual interests. Angry decisions are often punitive and escalatory. Fearful decisions are often avoidant and defensive. Excited decisions are often impulsive and under-researched. Anxious decisions are often hasty, made just to relieve the discomfort of uncertainty. None of these patterns produce reliably good outcomes. Recognizing your emotional state sounds simple but requires practice. Emotions don't announce themselves clearly. They infiltrate your reasoning while presenting themselves as logic. The angry person rarely thinks, "I'm making this decision because I'm angry." They think, "I'm making this decision because it's the right thing to do," while the anger invisibly shapes what counts as right. Physical signals offer more reliable indicators than mental ones. Racing heart, tight shoulders, clenched jaw, shallow breathing, heat in your face or chest. These sensations correlate with emotional activation that compromises judgment. Learning to check your body before making significant decisions provides an early warning system that your mental assessment might not be trustworthy. Irreversible commitments round out the fourth category. Some decisions can be easily undone. Others lock you in permanently or create reversal costs so high that going back becomes practically impossible. The latter deserves substantially more deliberation than the former because the stakes are asymmetric. A good choice produces modest benefits, while a bad choice produces lasting damage. Marriage, children, major surgery, signing long-term contracts, making public statements, ending relationships, quitting positions without alternatives lined up. These choices share the characteristic of being difficult or impossible to reverse. Each carries the potential for either great benefit or significant harm, with limited opportunity to correct course once committed. The irreversibility test provides a quick filter for any decision. Ask yourself, if this turns out to be wrong, how hard will it be to fix? The easier the correction, the less time the decision deserves. The harder the correction, the more carefully you should think before committing. Partial irreversibility counts too. Some decisions can technically be reversed, but only at substantial cost. Financial, emotional, reputational, or practical. Selling a house you shouldn't have bought is possible but expensive. Leaving a job you shouldn't have taken is possible but disruptive. Ending a relationship you shouldn't have started is possible but painful. The cost of reversal should factor into how much time you invest in the initial decision. These four categories overlap frequently. Career decisions often involve financial consequences and emotional stakes. Major purchases can be irreversible commitments. High-emotion situations frequently coincide with important choices in other categories. When multiple factors apply, the case for deliberation strengthens. The overlaps also help explain why certain decisions go wrong so predictably. The job accepted in desperate excitement combines career implications with emotional impairment. The expensive purchase made while angry about something else combines financial impact with compromised judgment. The long-term commitment entered during the euphoria of new attraction combines irreversibility with emotional blindness. Each factor alone justifies pausing. Combined, they create conditions almost guaranteed to produce regret. Quick testing methods help you identify when these categories apply without requiring extended analysis. The goal is a rapid assessment you can perform in seconds, flagging decisions that need more attention before you commit. The money check asks whether this decision involves spending, investing, or risking an amount that would bother you to lose, not devastate, bother. If the answer is yes, slow down. The threshold should be lower than you think, because your instinct is to minimize potential losses until they're unavoidable. The career check asks whether this decision will affect your professional trajectory, relationships, or options in ways that extend beyond the immediate situation. Jobs and projects and commitments that seem temporary often turn permanent. Skills you develop become what you're known for. People you work with become your network. If the choice has professional ripples, slow down. The emotion check asks whether you're currently experiencing strong feelings that might be influencing your judgment. The question isn't whether you have reasons for those feelings. You probably do. The question is whether the feelings might be affecting your reasoning independently of the facts. If you're not sure, slow down. Uncertainty about your emotional state is itself a warning sign. The reversibility check asks what happens if you're wrong. Can you easily undo this choice? What would it cost? In money, time, relationships, or opportunities? If the answer is nothing much, proceed. If the answer involves significant sacrifice, slow down. Running through these 4 questions takes perhaps 30 seconds. That minimal investment prevents countless rushed decisions on matters that deserved more consideration. Certain decision types almost always justify extra time, regardless of how they feel in the moment. Commitments lasting longer than a year deserve deliberation. Expenditures beyond a certain personal threshold deserve deliberation. Choices affecting your health deserve deliberation. Decisions made under deadline pressure deserve special scrutiny about whether the deadline is real. Choices you're being pushed toward by someone else deserve examination of their incentives. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Salespeople create urgency because urgency prevents deliberation. Deadlines are often artificial constructs designed to prevent you from discovering better alternatives. The person pushing you toward a quick decision frequently benefits from that speed in ways you don't. Recognizing these dynamics doesn't mean assuming bad faith everywhere. It means giving yourself permission to take time, even when external pressure suggests otherwise. The ability to say, "I need to think about this," separates people who make good decisions from people who make reactive ones. Those 5 words buy you time against almost any pressure. They're socially acceptable in virtually every context. They signal thoughtfulness rather than indecision. And they work. Saying them out loud commits you to the pause before your fast-thinking brain can override your better judgment. Minor decisions should flow quickly. Agonizing over small choices wastes cognitive resources and trains you to associate all decisions with stress. The goal isn't maximizing deliberation time, but optimizing it, taking more time when it matters and less time when it doesn't. Quick resolution strategies work well for low-stakes choices. Time limits force closure. I'll decide in the next 2 minutes and then move on. Satisficing beats optimizing. I'll pick the first option that meets my basic criteria rather than searching for the perfect choice. Coin flips resolve genuinely arbitrary decisions. If I can't tell which option is better, that means they're close enough that it doesn't matter. These strategies sound almost too simple, but they're extremely effective at preventing decision energy from being wasted on trivial matters. The lunch that takes 5 seconds to choose and the lunch that takes 5 minutes to choose produce the same satisfaction at the end of the day. The commute route you selected quickly gets you there just as well as the route you debated for 10 minutes. These choices don't benefit from deliberation, and treating them as if they do depletes you unnecessarily. The mental distinction between decisions worth thinking about and decisions not worth thinking about creates enormous efficiency gains. You'll make hundreds of choices today. Most deserve minimal attention. A handful deserve real consideration. Sorting them properly multiplies the effectiveness of your limited deliberative capacity. People err in both directions, overthinking trivial matters and underthinking significant ones. The overthinking problem gets more attention because it's visible and uncomfortable. The person paralyzed over minor choices clearly suffers and often seeks help. The underthinking problem is quieter and more dangerous because the costs remain hidden until they materialize as consequences. Poor decisions made quickly don't feel like poor decisions at the time. They feel decisive, even satisfying. The regret comes later, after the choice is played out and the alternatives have disappeared. By then, the connection to speed is obscured. You might blame bad luck, insufficient information, or circumstances beyond your control. The role of rushed thinking gets overlooked. Deliberate attention to decision categorization addresses both failure modes. Recognizing that a choice is minor liberates you to decide quickly without guilt. Recognizing that a choice is significant triggers protective slowdown before you commit. The framework applies in both directions, helping you speed up where appropriate and brake where necessary. Your personal history provides useful data about which decision categories give you the most trouble. Patterns of regret cluster around specific types of choices. Some people consistently make poor financial decisions under pressure. Others repeatedly accept career commitments without adequate reflection. Others enter relationships while still emotionally activated from previous ones. Looking back at your biggest regrets reveals where your personal vulnerabilities lie. What do the decisions you most wish you'd reconsidered have in common? Did they involve money, career, emotional intensity, or irreversible consequences? Were you under time pressure or feeling strong emotions? Did someone else benefit from your quick commitment? These patterns don't change unless you address them directly. The person who repeatedly makes impulsive purchases will continue doing so until they build specific safeguards against that tendency. The person who takes jobs without adequate research will continue doing so until they impose deliberation requirements on career choices. The person who commits during emotional highs will continue doing so until they learn to recognize and compensate for that vulnerability. Self-knowledge here isn't about criticism. It's about strategy. Knowing that you're particularly susceptible to rush decisions in certain categories allows you to build extra protection into those specific areas while relaxing elsewhere. The framework presented here isn't exhaustive. Edge cases exist. Some decisions that seem minor turn out to be significant. Some that seem significant turn out to be trivial. The goal isn't perfect classification. It's better than default classification. Moving from treat everything the same to distinguish high stakes from low stakes produces enormous improvements even when the sorting isn't flawless. Errors should bias toward excess caution on novel or unusual decisions. When you encounter a choice you haven't made before, you lack the pattern recognition that enables quick, accurate judgment on familiar matters. New territory deserves extra deliberation precisely because you can't rely on intuition built from repeated experience. Experience eventually refines your categorization ability. Decisions that once seemed significant become routine through repetition. The first time you negotiated a salary felt high stakes. The 10th time feels more manageable. The first major purchase in a category produces anxiety. Later purchases in that category benefit from accumulated knowledge. Time teaches which situations genuinely require deliberation and which initially felt important but proved otherwise. Building the habit of rapid categorization takes practice. You're training yourself to insert a brief assessment before engaging with any significant choice. Does this deserve time or not? The assessment itself should be quick. The point is sorting, not solving. Initially, this feels awkward. The extra mental move slows you down, even on decisions that don't warrant slowing. That inefficiency is temporary. With repetition, the categorization becomes automatic, adding virtually no time to choices that don't need deliberation while reliably flagging those that do. The physical sensation of encountering a choice provides a trigger point for the assessment. That moment of, I need to decide something, is your cue to ask the filtering questions. Money consequences, career implications, emotional activation, irreversibility. Running through these criteria takes seconds once the habit is established. What matters most isn't the precision of your categories, but the consistency of asking. The person who filters every significant decision, even imperfectly, dramatically outperforms the person who applies no filter at all. The act of pausing to categorize often provides enough space for better judgment to emerge, even when the categorization itself is rough. You now possess clear criteria for identifying when slower thinking produces better outcomes. financial decisions beyond your personal threshold, career choices with lasting implications, situations involving strong emotional activation, commitments that can't easily be undone. Each of these categories signals elevated risk from speed and elevated reward from deliberation. The habit of checking decisions against these criteria protects you from the default tendency to rush everything equally. Most choices will pass through quickly. Minor matters that don't warrant analysis. A smaller number will trigger the pause, buying you time to engage your full cognitive capacity before committing. The next chapter delivers the method for using that time productively. Knowing when to slow down is only half the equation. Knowing what to do during the pause completes the system. Chapter 3. The pause protocol time alone doesn't improve decisions. What you do with that time determines whether slowing down produces better outcomes or just delays bad ones. This distinction separates productive deliberation from purposeless waiting. Most people who try to think more carefully about important choices discover that extra time often creates more confusion rather than less. They stare at the problem without making progress. They cycle through the same considerations repeatedly. They generate anxiety instead of clarity. Then they conclude that deliberation doesn't work for them and return to quick, reactive decision-making, having learned nothing except that pausing felt uncomfortable. The problem wasn't the pause. The problem was the absence of a method for using the pause productively. Unstructured thinking time tends toward rumination, worry, and circular logic. Structured thinking time produces insight, clarity, and confidence. The difference lies entirely in how you direct your attention during those crucial minutes or hours. This chapter provides a complete protocol for turning pauses into better decisions, specific questions to ask, concrete exercises to perform, and practical techniques for buying yourself time without appearing indecisive. Productive pauses have defined beginnings and endings. Open-ended deliberation stretches into procrastination because there's no clear finish line. You keep thinking until something forces you to stop, a deadline, exhaustion, or someone demanding an answer. This passive approach cedes control to external factors rather than your own judgment about when enough analysis has occurred. Setting a time limit before you begin changes the entire dynamic. You might give yourself 20 minutes, an hour, a day, or a week, depending on the significance of the decision. The specific duration matters less than having one. A defined endpoint creates productive pressure that keeps thinking focused and prevents endless cycling. The time limit should match the stakes. Minor decisions that cleared your filter from the previous chapter might warrant 5 to 15 minutes of structured thinking. Moderate decisions might justify an hour or two. Major decisions, the ones that will shape years of your life, might deserve days or weeks of intermittent analysis. Proportionality prevents both overthinking minor matters and underthinking major ones. Writing down your time limit commits you to it. I will decide about this job offer by Thursday at noon has more force than a vague intention to think it over for a few days. The written commitment creates accountability, even if only to yourself. When Thursday at noon arrives, you make the choice. The deliberation period ends. The rumination stops. The questions you ask during the pause shape the quality of your thinking. Unfocused reflection tends to confirm whatever you already believe. Focused inquiry challenges assumptions and uncovers information you might otherwise miss. 5 questions consistently produce better decisions across virtually every domain. These aren't complicated or clever. They're straightforward inquiries that most people skip in their rush toward resolution. Each one addresses a specific blind spot that quick thinking typically overlooks. The first question asks what you're optimizing for. Most decisions involve trade-offs between competing values. The job with higher pay might require longer hours. The investment with greater potential returns might carry more risk. The relationship that offers excitement might lack stability. Clarity about your priorities prevents choices that optimize for the wrong thing. People frequently discover, when forced to articulate their priorities explicitly, that they've been pursuing goals they don't actually value most. The prestigious option might matter less than the fulfilling one. The safe choice might matter less than the interesting one. The financially optimal path might matter less than the one aligned with your deeper values. This question surfaces the trade-offs and forces you to decide which dimensions truly matter. The second question asks what you would advise a friend facing this identical situation. This simple reframe produces remarkably different perspectives. Something about the shift from first person to third person loosens the grip of fear, ego, and short-term thinking. The advice you'd give someone you care about often differs substantially from the choice you're about to make for yourself. The gap between these two answers reveals distortions in your thinking. When you would tell a friend to walk away from a bad deal but you're considering accepting it yourself, something is off. When you would tell a friend to take the risk but you're paralyzed by fear, something is off. When you would tell a friend to trust their instincts but you're ignoring your own, something is off. The friend perspective also introduces accountability. You're implicitly asking whether you could defend this choice to someone who cares about your well-being. Decisions that seem reasonable in isolation often look foolish when exposed to this imaginary external view. If you'd be embarrassed to explain your reasoning to a close friend, that embarrassment contains important information. The third question asks what could make this decision wrong? Not whether it might be wrong, what specifically could make it wrong? This question forces you to identify the assumptions underlying your current preference and examine whether those assumptions might be mistaken. Every decision rests on beliefs about the future. You're predicting that certain conditions will hold, certain people will behave predictably, certain trends will continue. The future stubbornly refuses to cooperate with predictions. Your assumptions might be wrong in ways you haven't considered. Listing potential failure modes doesn't mean abandoning the decision. It means understanding what you're betting on. The job might be wrong if the company's financial situation is weaker than it appears. The investment might be wrong if the market shifts in unexpected directions. The commitment might be wrong if your own priorities change over time. Knowing these vulnerabilities in advance allows you to either gather more information, build in safeguards, or proceed with appropriate caution. The habit of imagining failure runs counter to positive thinking culture, which treats doubt as something to overcome rather than something to learn from. But optimistic blindness has caused more catastrophes than thoughtful pessimism ever has. The people who consider what might go wrong are better positioned to prevent it or to respond effectively when it happens. The fourth question asks what option you'd choose if you had to decide right now. This question cuts through deliberation that has become circular or stalled. Even when you feel uncertain, you usually have a leaning. Some option feels slightly better than the others. Some direction pulls at you even if you can't fully articulate why. Naming this preference brings it into the open where you can examine it. Maybe your leaning is based on solid intuition built from relevant experience. Maybe it's based on fear, wishful thinking, or social pressure. You can't evaluate its validity until you've acknowledged that it exists. The question also tests whether more deliberation is actually needed. If your answer comes easily, if you know instantly what you'd choose under pressure, extended analysis might not change anything. The pause has served its purpose by confirming rather than generating your preference. Continued deliberation at that point often creates doubt rather than resolving it. Conversely, if you genuinely can't answer the question, that inability signals where your thinking needs more work. The uncertainty has a shape. It's localized in specific gaps, missing information, unresolved trade-offs, or conflicting values. Identifying where the uncertainty lives tells you what to focus on next. The fifth question asks what you'll wish you had considered a year from now. This temporal shift expands your perspective beyond immediate circumstances. Present concerns loom large and distort judgment. Future concerns seem distant and easy to minimize. The question reverses this bias by asking you to take the future perspective now. A year from now, you'll have lived with the consequences of this decision. Some factors that currently feel pressing will have faded into irrelevance. Other factors you're currently ignoring will have assumed major importance. The short-term discomfort of a difficult conversation will be long forgotten. The long-term consequences of avoiding that conversation will still be unfolding. This question also reveals what you don't know but could learn. Missing information that would be easy to gather now, but impossible to recover later, deserves attention before you commit. Due diligence you could perform but are tempted to skip might matter enormously in hindsight. The question prompts you to do the work now that future, you will wish past, you had done. Running through these 5 questions takes perhaps 10 to 15 minutes for most decisions. That modest investment catches errors that would otherwise slip through and surfaces considerations that would otherwise remain hidden. The questions don't guarantee perfect decisions. Nothing does. They dramatically increase the probability of good ones. Writing your answers produces better results than thinking them through silently. Putting thoughts on paper forces precision that mental processing allows you to skip. The vague sense that something might be wrong becomes a specific concern you can address. The fuzzy intuition about what you're optimizing for becomes a clear statement of priorities you can evaluate. You don't need to write formally. Notes, fragments, and rough sentences serve the purpose. The act of externalizing your thoughts matters more than the polish of the output. Even bullet points on the back of an envelope, despite my general warnings about over-relying on lists, serve this function better than purely internal reflection. Buying thinking time in real-world situations requires social skill. People around you won't pause patiently while you run through deliberation protocols. They'll expect responses, answers, commitments. The pressure feels personal even when it isn't. Learning to create space for thinking without damaging relationships or appearing incompetent is essential for applying these methods in practice. Useful phrases: buy time without signaling weakness. I want to give this proper consideration before I respond communicates thoughtfulness rather than uncertainty. Let me think about that and get back to you tomorrow establishes a timeline without declining engagement. That's an interesting question. I want to make sure I give you a good answer. Flatters the asker while creating space. I don't want to commit without being sure I can follow through. Demonstrates responsibility rather than indecision. These phrases work because they reframe delay as respect rather than avoidance. You're not stalling because you're confused. You're pausing because the matter deserves serious attention. This framing is usually accurate. You're genuinely taking time because the decision is important. Articulating that reality shifts how others perceive your pause. Physical removal often helps when internal discipline isn't sufficient. Changing your environment disrupts the momentum pushing you toward quick commitment. Walking away from the negotiating table, stepping outside the store, leaving the room where the conversation happened, each creates distance that supports clearer thinking. The change of scenery doesn't need to be dramatic. A brief walk, a few minutes alone, or simply moving to a different physical space can break the psychological grip of the immediate situation. You're no longer surrounded by cues pushing you toward decision. The salesperson's face, the deadline on the whiteboard, the expectant colleagues, these influences fade when you're not in their physical presence. Sleep deserves special mention as a thinking tool. The phrase "sleep on it" encodes genuine wisdom about cognitive processing. Your brain continues working on problems during sleep, consolidating information and generating connections that conscious analysis misses. Decisions that felt clear in the evening sometimes look different in the morning. Decisions that felt impossible become obvious after rest. The one-night rule applies well to significant commitments. No major decision finalized the same day it first becomes possible. This simple discipline prevents choices made in the grip of excitement, fear, or exhaustion. The delay allows emotions to settle and perspective to return. Morning judgment tends to be more reliable than late-night judgment. For precisely this reason. Procrastination masquerades as deliberation when you're avoiding the discomfort of commitment rather than productively analyzing the choice. Distinguishing between these states requires honest self-assessment. Are you learning something useful during this time? Are you getting closer to resolution? Or are you circling the same ground repeatedly while pretending the delay serves a purpose? Warning signs of procrastination include repeatedly revisiting the same considerations without new information, generating anxiety without generating clarity, and feeling relief when external factors postpone the decision further. Productive deliberation feels like progress even when it's uncomfortable. Procrastination feels like avoidance even when it's disguised as analysis. The 5 questions serve as a procrastination check. If you've answered them thoroughly and your thinking continues to loop, the additional time probably isn't producing value. The decision is ripe, even if it doesn't feel ripe. Further delay represents avoidance rather than wisdom. Commitment deadlines you impose on yourself address this directly. When your self-imposed time limit arrives, you decide. The deliberation period ends. You might not feel perfectly certain. You probably won't. Perfect certainty is rare and often illusory. Sufficient certainty is achievable and appropriate. The deadline forces you to accept sufficiency and move forward. Structured waiting differs from passive waiting. When you've done your analysis but the decision still needs time to settle, specific activities fill that space productively. Physical exercise clears mental fog and often produces unexpected insights. Conversation with trusted others introduces perspectives you wouldn't generate alone. Exposure to unrelated problems gives your subconscious background processing time. These activities share the characteristic of keeping you engaged without directly grinding on the decision. The grinding approach, staring at the problem, rereading your notes, running the same calculations again, produces diminishing returns quickly. After the analytical work is done, what remains is integration, and integration often happens best when you're not trying to force it. The shower insight phenomenon is real. Breakthrough clarity frequently arrives during routine activities that occupy conscious attention lightly, while leaving deeper processing undisturbed. Running, cleaning, cooking, driving familiar routes. These activities create conditions favorable to the kind of integration that resolves difficult decisions. Building them into your deliberation period deliberately takes advantage of this phenomenon. Different decisions benefit from different deliberation structures. Financial choices often improve with written calculation, actual numbers on paper rather than estimates floating in your mind. The act of quantifying forces precision and often reveals that the situation differs from your loose intuition about it. Career decisions often improve with input from others who know you well. Your own perspective on your strengths, weaknesses, and values contains blind spots that people close to you can identify. Their observations don't replace your judgment but inform it. Seeking perspectives from people with relevant experience in the path you're considering adds additional data points. High-emotion decisions often benefit primarily from time itself. The intensity fades, proportionality returns. What felt urgent yesterday feels manageable today. The deliberation structure for emotionally charged choices should emphasize waiting over active analysis. Let the feelings settle before you analyze, not while they're still peaking. Irreversible commitments often benefit from premortems. The exercise of imagining that you made the choice, it went badly, and you're now explaining why. This future retrospective identifies failure modes that forward-looking analysis misses. The shift in temporal perspective reveals assumptions and risks that are otherwise invisible. Timed exercises make abstract methods concrete. The 5-minute clarity burst works for moderate decisions that are stalling without cause. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Write continuously about the decision, your concerns, your preferences, your fears, your hopes, without stopping to edit or evaluate. When the timer ends, read what you wrote. The important considerations usually announce themselves in this raw output. The morning pages approach extends this for major decisions. Before starting your day, spend 15 to 20 minutes writing about the choice you're facing. Do this for 3 to 5 consecutive mornings. Each session will produce different material as your subconscious continues processing between sessions. Patterns emerge. Priorities clarify. The decision often resolves itself by the end of the process. The devil's advocate exercise addresses confirmation bias. Spend 10 minutes arguing against your current preference as forcefully as you can. Don't hedge or acknowledge the other side's flaws. Fully commit to the opposing position and make the strongest case possible. This exercise reveals weaknesses in your reasoning that you've been avoiding and ensures you've genuinely considered alternatives rather than dismissing them prematurely. Building the protocol into habit requires repetition. The first several times you use structured deliberation will feel awkward and slow. You'll be tempted to skip portions or return to intuitive decision-making. This temptation is strongest, precisely when the method would help most. During high-pressure situations, when you feel you don't have time for process. Practicing on moderate-stakes decisions builds the habit before high-stakes situations test it. The job lunch choice doesn't warrant full protocol, but practicing on weekend plans or medium-sized purchases develops the mental patterns you'll need when bigger choices arise. The questions become automatic. The timing becomes intuitive. The whole system speeds up through repetition. You'll also discover which elements of the protocol serve you best. Some people find the friend perspective question most valuable. Others get the most mileage from the pre-mortem. Others rely heavily on the sleep on it rule. Personalizing the protocol based on your own patterns increases its effectiveness and your willingness to use it. The pause accomplishes nothing if it doesn't lead to action. Every deliberation period should end with a commitment, either to the decision itself or to a specific next step in gathering needed information. Open-ended contemplation without resolution serves anxiety more than judgment. When you've run through your analysis and the time limit arrives, you choose. The choice might be wrong. All choices might be wrong. That risk comes with being human and having limited information about the future. What you control is the quality of your process, not the perfection of your outcomes. Good process produces better results over time, even when individual decisions don't pan out. Confidence in your process replaces confidence in your conclusions. You'll never have certainty about whether you made the right choice. You can have certainty that you gave the choice appropriate attention, asked the relevant questions, and considered the important factors. That process-based confidence sustains you through the inevitable uncertainty that follows every significant commitment. The protocol you now possess transforms empty pauses into productive deliberation. Clear time limits prevent endless rumination. Targeted questions surface considerations that quick thinking overlooks. Social techniques buy you space without damaging relationships. Timed exercises make abstract methods practical. The distinction between productive analysis and disguised procrastination keeps you honest about what your delay is actually accomplishing. Your toolkit is complete. The remaining challenge is using it consistently when the pressure to decide quickly feels most intense, when colleagues are waiting, when opportunities seem fleeting, when your own emotions are pushing you toward resolution. That challenge is the subject of the final chapter. Chapter 4. Slow thinking in a fast world. The methods mean nothing if you can't use them when they matter most. Everything you've learned in this book works brilliantly in theory. The decision filters make sense. The pause protocol feels achievable. The questions produce genuine insight when you practice them in calm moments. Then, life happens. A colleague needs an answer in the next hour. A deal expires at midnight. Your phone buzzes with urgency while you're trying to think clearly. The pressure mounts, and the careful approach you committed to yesterday evaporates under the heat of immediate demands. This gap between intention and execution has defeated countless attempts at better decision-making. People read books, attend workshops, and genuinely resolve to think more carefully, then abandon everything when real situations test their resolve. The environment always wins, unless you build specific defenses against its influence. This chapter provides those defenses. You'll learn to protect your thinking time from interruption, communicate your deliberate approach without alienating others, and maintain your methods even when everyone around you insists that speed is the only option. The system you've built is only as valuable as your ability to deploy it under pressure. External pressure to decide quickly comes from everywhere. Employers want commitments before you've had time to evaluate. Salespeople manufacture urgency through limited time offers. Friends and family express impatience when you don't respond immediately. Social media trains everyone to expect instant reactions. The entire environment conspires against careful thinking, not through malice but through momentum. Fast has become default, and anything slower requires active resistance. Understanding where the pressure originates helps you respond appropriately. Some urgency is legitimate. Genuine deadlines exist. Real opportunities do expire. People sometimes need answers quickly for valid reasons. Other urgency is manufactured, created to benefit someone else at your expense. The skill lies in distinguishing real-time constraints from artificial ones. Manufactured urgency has recognizable patterns. The pressure typically serves the interests of whoever applies it. The salesperson benefits from your quick purchase. The employer benefits from filling the position before you discover better alternatives. The person pushing you toward commitment often gains something from your speed that they wouldn't gain from your careful consideration. This doesn't make them villains. They're pursuing their own interests. Your job is to recognize when those interests diverge from yours. Questions expose artificial deadlines. What happens if I decide tomorrow instead of today? Often reveals that the supposed urgency is negotiable. Why does this need to be resolved right now? Sometimes uncovers that it doesn't. What would change if we had another week? Occasionally produces the admission that nothing would change at all. These questions don't accuse anyone of manipulation. They simply test whether the time constraint is real. Protecting thinking time requires treating it as non-negotiable. Anything that can be interrupted will be interrupted. Deliberation scheduled loosely. I'll think about it when I have a chance. Gets crowded out by whatever feels more urgent. The only reliable approach treats thinking time like any other important appointment. Blocked on the calendar, defended against intrusion, and taken seriously. The specific blocking method matters less than having one. Some people reserve morning hours before the day's demands begin. Others protect evening time after immediate pressures have subsided. Some take thinking walks, scheduled periods away from devices and distractions. Others use commute time or waiting periods that would otherwise be wasted. The common element is intention. You decide in advance when deliberation will occur and guard that time against encroachment. Physical environment shapes thinking quality more than most people realize. Noisy, interrupted settings produce noisy, interrupted thoughts. Quiet, protected settings allow deeper processing. You probably can't control your environment completely, but you can often influence it more than you assume. Closing a door, finding an empty conference room, going somewhere your phone doesn't follow. These simple moves create conditions favorable to careful thinking. Digital intrusion poses the greatest modern threat to deliberation. Notifications interrupt concentration with merciless frequency. The average person checks their phone dozens of times per hour. Each check breaks whatever train of thought was developing. Sustained attention becomes impossible when you're constantly pulled back to the surface. Turning off notifications during thinking time isn't optional if you're serious about improving your decisions. The phone goes on silent. The email tab closes. The door shuts, literally or metaphorically. These measures feel extreme only because constant availability has become normalized. Previous generations made important decisions without being reachable every second. You can too. Communicating your deliberate approach to others requires finesse. The goal isn't announcing that you've read a book about thinking slower. That would invite eye rolls and skepticism. The goal is getting the time you need without damaging relationships or appearing incompetent. Language choices matter enormously. I need to think about it sounds hesitant and uncertain. I want to make sure I give this the attention it deserves sounds thoughtful and responsible. Both sentences request the same thing. They produce very different impressions. Framing deliberation as respect rather than reluctance changes how others perceive it. You're not stalling because you're unsure. You're pausing because the matter is significant. You're not avoiding commitment because you're afraid. You're taking time because you want your commitment to mean something. This framing is usually accurate, which makes it easy to deliver authentically. Specific timelines reduce friction. Let me think about it leaves others wondering how long they'll wait. I'll have an answer for you by Thursday. gives them a concrete expectation. The second version actually asks for more, a defined period rather than vague consideration, but it feels more cooperative because it provides certainty. Explaining your reasoning, briefly, sometimes helps. This is a significant decision, and I want to make sure I'm considering it properly justifies the pause without requiring elaborate defense. Most reasonable people respect this. Those who don't respect it are often people whose pressure you should resist anyway. Different relationships require different approaches. Professional contexts typically allow more formal requests for time. Personal contexts often require softer handling. The colleague who asks for a decision about a project expects professional communication. The friend who invites you somewhere expects casual responsiveness. Applying the same approach to both creates awkwardness. Professional situations benefit from explicit process. I have a practice of sleeping on significant commitments establishes a pattern others can expect. I'd like to think this through before responding. Can we schedule a follow-up for tomorrow? Create structure. Let me review the details and get back to you with a considered answer. Signals thoroughness rather than uncertainty. These phrases work because professional contexts value deliberation, even when they also value speed. Personal situations call for warmth alongside the pause. That sounds great. Let me check a few things and I'll confirm with you soon. Maintains enthusiasm while creating space. I want to say yes, but I need to make sure I can actually commit. Expresses interest without prematurely locking in. Give me a day to think it over. I want to make sure I'm being fair to both of us. Invokes consideration for the other person rather than just yourself. The consistent element across contexts is combining warmth with boundaries. Cold refusals to commit damage relationships. Warm requests for time preserve them. You're not rejecting the other person or their proposal. You're taking their offer seriously enough to consider it properly. Handling people who won't accept delay requires different strategies depending on whether the pressure is reasonable or manipulative. Legitimate urgency deserves accommodation. If someone genuinely needs an answer quickly for valid reasons, working within their timeline shows respect for their constraints. The goal isn't to impose your pace on every situation, but to ensure you're not rushed unnecessarily. The question to ask yourself is whether the other person's urgency benefits them at your expense. The employer who needs an answer by Friday because they have other candidates to consider has legitimate constraints. The employer who creates artificial deadline pressure to prevent you from shopping for better offers is manipulating. The friend who needs to know your plans because they're coordinating a group has valid reasons. The friend who pressures you to commit immediately because they don't want you to reconsider is pushing their interests over yours. When you identify manipulation, resistance becomes appropriate. I understand you need an answer quickly, but I'm not going to make this decision without proper consideration draws a clear line. Some people will respect it, others will escalate pressure. Those who escalate are showing you something important about how they'll behave in the future. Decisions made under manipulative pressure tend to benefit the manipulator. Protecting yourself from that pattern is worth the social friction. Walking away remains an option when pressure becomes unreasonable. The deal that evaporates if you don't commit immediately was probably a bad deal. The opportunity that can't survive one night of consideration was probably not the opportunity it appeared to be. The relationship that can't tolerate thoughtful decision-making will produce other problems down the line. Sometimes the best response to decide now or lose it is to let it go. Internal pressure often exceeds external pressure. Your own discomfort with uncertainty pushes you toward premature closure more than anyone else's demands. The anxiety of not knowing what you'll decide creates urgency that has nothing to do with actual time constraints. Managing this internal pressure is essential for maintaining deliberate thinking. Uncertainty feels uncomfortable because your brain treats unresolved decisions as open loops that consume cognitive resources. These loops generate background anxiety that persists until closed. Quick decisions close loops quickly, which produces relief, even when the decisions themselves are poor. Your brain rewards speed because it wants the discomfort to end, not because speed produces better outcomes. Recognizing this dynamic helps you tolerate the discomfort rather than escape it prematurely. The anxiety is real, but misleading. It reflects your brain's preference for closure, not the actual urgency of the situation. Sitting with uncertainty isn't pleasant, but it's often necessary for good decisions. The discomfort passes. Poor decisions linger. Physical techniques help manage the anxiety. Deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing the fight-or-flight response that pressure triggers. Movement disperses stress hormones that accumulate during difficult deliberation. Adequate sleep prevents the emotional dysregulation that exhaustion produces. These aren't optional extras. They're maintenance requirements for a system capable of careful thinking under pressure. Building a support system multiplies your capacity for deliberate decision-making. Trusted advisors provide perspective you can't generate alone. They challenge assumptions you've stopped questioning. They notice patterns in your thinking that you're too close to see. They offer alternative viewpoints without the emotional investment that clouds your own judgment. Identifying the right advisors matters. You want people who will tell you what you need to hear rather than what you want to hear. Cheerleaders feel supportive but don't improve decisions. Critics feel harsh, but often provide the most valuable input. The ideal advisor combines honesty with goodwill, someone who genuinely wants what's best for you and isn't afraid to say things that might be unwelcome. Different decisions benefit from different advisors. Financial choices warrant input from people with relevant expertise. Career decisions benefit from those who know your strengths and weaknesses. Personal choices often require advisors who understand your values and circumstances. Building a roster of trusted people across domains gives you appropriate resources for whatever decisions arise. Consulting advisors takes time, which reinforces the need for protected deliberation periods. The conversation can't happen if you've already committed. Reaching out can't occur if the deadline has passed. Building an advisor consultation as part of your process requires knowing in advance that you'll need that time, which means identifying significant decisions early and allocating space for input before external pressure closes the window. Routine practices maintain your capacity for slow thinking, even when specific decisions don't require it. Just as athletes train between competitions, thinkers benefit from practice between major decisions. Regular habits keep the skills sharp and the systems accessible when you need them. Daily reflection provides low-stakes practice. Spending a few minutes reviewing the day's decisions, what you chose, why you chose it, what you might have considered differently, builds the habit of examining your own reasoning. This doesn't need to be formal or lengthy. A few minutes of honest assessment during your commute or before bed is sufficient. Weekly review offers a broader view. Looking back at the week's significant choices reveals patterns invisible in daily snapshots. Did you rush when you should have paused? Did you agonize when you should have decided quickly? Did external pressure influence you more than you realized at the time? These observations inform adjustments to your approach. Periodic audits of major decisions from the past year expose longer-term patterns. Which choices worked out well? Which didn't? What did the successful decisions have in common? What characterized the failures? This retrospective analysis generates personal data about your decision-making tendencies that no general advice can provide. Environmental design reduces reliance on willpower. Systems that make slow thinking the default require less effort to maintain than systems that require constant vigilance. Wherever possible, build structures that automate your deliberate approach. Default delays on significant financial transactions prevent impulse decisions. Many banks allow you to set waiting periods on large transfers. Many brokerages offer cooling-off periods before trades execute. These structural interventions remove the decision from the moment of temptation and shift it to a calmer future state. Physical separation from decision triggers creates natural pauses. Keeping credit cards inconvenient prevents casual spending. Requiring multiple steps before major commitments builds delay into the process. Making it slightly harder to act quickly makes it easier to act wisely. Accountability structures leverage social pressure constructively. Telling a trusted friend that you won't make any significant commitments without consulting them first creates external reinforcement for your internal intentions. The friend doesn't need to do anything except exist as someone you'd need to explain yourself to. That imagined conversation often provides the pause you need. Failure is part of the process. You will make rushed decisions despite everything you've learned. The pressure will sometimes win. Old habits will sometimes reassert themselves. Someone will catch you off guard, or your own anxiety will override your better judgment, and you'll commit to something before you've properly thought it through. This isn't cause for self-criticism. Perfect execution isn't the goal. Better execution is. Every time you successfully pause when you would have previously rushed, you've improved. Every time you catch yourself about to commit prematurely and pull back, you've grown. The standard isn't perfection, it's progress. Failure also provides data. Each rushed decision you regret reveals something about your vulnerabilities. What triggered the speed? What pressure succeeded where others failed? What internal state made you susceptible? These observations inform future defenses. The mistake becomes useful if you learn from it. Recovering from poor decisions matters more than preventing them entirely. Some rushed choices can be revised once you've had time to think properly. Others require damage control rather than reversal. Either way, your response to the mistake shapes its long-term impact more than the mistake itself. The methods you've acquired work. People who apply them consistently make better decisions than people who don't. The evidence is overwhelming and the logic is straightforward. More time produces more consideration reveals more factors, and more factors lead to better informed choices. This isn't complicated or mysterious. It's simply true. The challenge was never understanding the approach. The challenge was implementing it in an environment hostile to deliberation. That challenge doesn't disappear because you've read a book. The pressure will continue. The urgency will persist. The temptation to decide quickly will remain. What changes is your capacity to resist. You now possess a framework for identifying decisions that warrant careful thought and decisions that don't. You have a protocol for using pause time productively rather than anxiously. You understand how to communicate your approach to others without creating unnecessary friction. You know how to recognize manufactured urgency and respond appropriately. You've considered how to manage internal pressure and build environmental supports that make slow thinking easier. This system serves you best when you trust it. Doubt creeps in during high-pressure moments. The suspicion that maybe this time speed really is necessary, maybe this situation is different, maybe you should just decide and move on. That doubt is almost always wrong. The situations that genuinely require instant decisions are far rarer than they feel. The vast majority of urgent choices could tolerate an additional hour, day, or week without meaningful cost. Trusting your process means following it, even when doing so feels risky, taking the pause when others are pushing you to commit, asking the questions when you're tempted to skip them, protecting your thinking time when 100 other demands compete for attention. The process works precisely because it overrides the impulses that lead to poor decisions. Following it requires faith that the temporary discomfort of delay produces better outcomes than the false relief of premature commitment. Experience will build that faith over time. Each decision made deliberately that works out well reinforces the value of the approach. Each rushed decision that backfires reminds you why you committed to something different. The feedback accumulates. The evidence mounts. The trust deepens. You already possess everything you need. The framework is complete. The techniques are practical. The implementation strategies address real obstacles you'll face. What remains is application, taking what you've learned and using it in the actual decisions that shape your life. Some of those decisions are already in front of you. Others will arrive soon. Each one offers an opportunity to practice what you've learned, to prove to yourself that careful thinking produces better results, to build the evidence base that sustains the approach over time. Start with the next significant choice you face. Apply the filter. Take the pause. Ask the questions. Protect the time you need from the pressure that surrounds you. Slow thinking isn't weakness. It's wisdom applied to the problems of daily life. The fast world will continue its frantic pace regardless of what you do. Your decisions don't need to match that pace. They can unfold at whatever speed produces the best outcomes for you. Speed is a choice, not a requirement. You've now made a different choice, and that choice will serve you better than anything the rushing world has to offer.